And there's already think pieces saying, "Oh, racism didn't kill Tyre Nichols. Moronic, poorly trained cops did." That's a headline.
I don't want to hear any more about the training. What type of training do you need to be told you can't beat somebody to death on the fucking sidewalk?
Right.
There's no training for that. You either have a conscience that's defective or you have a conscience that is effective. It's only one or the other. Welcome to Raw Food, Jay. Heavy-hearted today, though.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Once again, we have to join you to talk about an unarmed person that was killed by the police. This time, this person was beaten to death. Holy shit.
First, let's name the police officers who were feeling so emboldened that night. Let's give them the shine that they so blessedly deserve. To Darius Bean, Demetrius Haley, Emmett Martin III. What a way to take down that legacy, bruh. Desmond Mills Jr., Justin Smith, 5 members of the now dismantled Scorpion unit. None of these gentlemen are over 35 years old. None of these gentlemen have been on the police force for longer than 5 years. It is rare that people on the force are allowed to join special units beneath 10 to 15 years of experience. So that within itself will be investigated. Important to note that as of today, all 5 officers will be charged with felonies, murder 2 with a minimum of 15 years, maximum of 60 years, facing up to 153 years in prison if they get found guilty of all charges. And these officers were specifically the ones who beat Tyre Nichols to death on January 7th. Subsequently, not alone though, it's important to note that there are other officers who not only were at the scene, but arrived to the scene, including EMT, who were subsequently fired as of today's reporting as well. 3 EMTs, let's make sure to note them as well. Robert Long, Jamichael Sandridge, and Lieutenant Michelle Whitaker have all been fired from the Memphis EMT division with regards to the Tyre Nichols case as well.
Yep. 2 of them were EMTs. One was a fire chief or something like that.
Thank you.
EMTs report up to the fire department bears. Sounded like.
Correct. Who were all involved in the incident of January 7th of an infraction, a basic traffic stop, which has not been confirmed by video cameras or by the police, should have even occurred in the first place. So far, there has been no evidence that Tyre Nichols was recklessly driving. I watched about 20 minutes of the video. It is the most sickening thing I've ever seen in my lifetime. I think it's way worse than George Floyd. For me, it was reminiscent of the photos and deaths that occurred during apartheid in South Africa. It reminded me of murders of people like Stephen Biko that were beaten to death by law enforcement during the apartheid movement. And I'm deeply disturbed on a level I don't think I can say I've ever experienced in my lifetime. This cut me way worse than George Floyd. What say you?
I'm still processing it. I haven't been able to bring myself to watch the entire video with the sound on because the initial gut-wrenching part of it already got to me. But I have seen the video with the sound off. Let's get into some context, some added context to help everyone kind of understand more about this. So the Scorpion unit. I'm going to look up what Scorpion stood for, but the name was an acronym.
Yeah, it meant Street Crimes Operation to Restore Peace in Our Neighborhoods.
There you go. Street Crimes Operations to Restore Peace in Our Neighborhood.
Oh, the irony.
What? Yeah. And also, what the fuck does pulling over Tyre Nichols have anything to do with restoring peace in the neighborhood? Even if he was recklessly driving, did you need to beat him to death? You couldn't just...
Yeah, I mean, they didn't beat Hannibal Lecter to death. I see no reason to beat this boy to death. And he was coming home from photographing the sunset. I mean, can you imagine how peaceful he must have been inside his soul? He's around the corner from his house.
Yeah.
You know, he probably had a great day. And it's amazing how a series of events can come together no control of your own and absolutely dismantle your life and the life of others. For me, I was inconsolable. I cried for my ancestors when I watched this video. And I cannot imagine watching my son be murdered like that. I might go scorched earth after that. I don't think that mother will ever sleep again for the rest of her life, knowing that her son was murdered 80 yards from her house, 3 houses away. And according to the footage, when the police officers pulled over Tyre, they did not even ask him anything. They didn't ask him for his license or his registration. They didn't give him any instructions. They literally just yank him out of the car, throw him on the ground, start cursing him out, calling him a bitch, kicking him in the stomach, tasering him, and pepper spraying him. And I'm like, okay, we don't even do this to like serial killers, right? Like Jeffrey Dahmer made it to jail. Jeffrey Dahmer had his day in court. Why can't we? That's all we're saying. We're not saying black people don't commit crimes. We're not saying black people shouldn't be arrested. We're just saying, how come we can't seem to get our day in court? Hannibal Lecter does. Jeffrey Dahmer does. The Gacy clown killer made it to court. Is there a reason African-American boys who have infractions can't seem to just get to court and fight a ticket like everybody else?
Right.
May those police officers burn in hell. I'll tell you right now, I don't forgive them. Fuck them.
Yeah. The common refrain every time this happens is, well, they should just comply. When it's black people and we bring race into it, it's, well, black people have a problem with authority. These cops started beating this man as
they started beating him instantly.
And then they're saying, well, he ran from the cops. He ran
because you were beating him instantly.
They immediately started beating him. They yanked him out the car and immediately started stomping him. So yes,
I mean,
the
he says it.
Mechanism is going to take over at some point, because they weren't even interested in trying to handcuff him for very long. They weren't interested in getting his ID or actually conducting a traffic stop.
There was no investigation of any kind. And you hear him say to them, he's like, okay, you guys are doing the most right now. He even says it calmly, like, you guys are really doing the most right now. Like, just take it easy. I'm on the ground. He's not armed. He is outnumbered. And I think they got salty because, I mean, after they had to chase him because he dipped after he realized that they were going to murder him on the sidewalk. And he was right. His instincts were on point.
Exactly.
They were out of breath. They were pissed that he ran off. I mean, they were just a straight up Gestapo gang. And I have no mercy on them. They've humiliated themselves and their families. And I hope they burn in hell. I got no forgiveness in my heart for them. I'm not in the forgiveness business. That's God and Jesus. That ain't my line of work.
And, this also calls to mind another recent death at the hands of the police that happened in Los Angeles this month as well. Keenan Anderson. He also was involved in a traffic stop. Not a traffic stop, actually. There was a car accident. He's the one who called the police. And he wanted to go to a more visible area. He's compliant. The video shows that he's compliant. He's got his hands, behind his head, and he's on both knees. And he says, I just want to go to a more visible area. So he does get up after that, but he doesn't run. He calmly walks to a more visible area and goes to get back, in the same position. And then the cops tackle him and they tased him to death. Now, why did he do that? Why did he freak out? Why did he have a panic attack? Whatever you want to say. Because he had the feeling that these cops were going to murder him, because they were being overly aggressive from the very beginning.
From the jump.
Treating this like a person who needs help after a car accident. They immediately showed up and became aggressive and escalated the situation. He ended up dying at the hands of the police. So his instinct, as well as Tyre Nichols' instincts, were correct. These police were not interested in even doing the job of policing. They were interested in doing the job of beating you to death or tasing you to death for no reason. They weren't interested in responding to the call that they were asked to go respond to.
It is by far the most disgusting thing I've ever seen in real time in my lifetime. There's no excuse for this whatsoever. The sickening part about this is that, based on some of what I've read, not only was this stop not validated as of this time, there was no evidence that he was recklessly driving. There was no evidence that they indicated any instructions to him whatsoever when they opened the vehicle. I'm also reading that they actually contacted his mother and told her that he had been arrested for a DUI and was being taken to the hospital, but there was no need for her to come there because from the hospital, he was going to be arrested and booked. So they started piecing together a story with the mother, which was not true. And to be emboldened enough to start piecing together a story on camera, to me, is the most bizarre part of the entire video.
Mm-hmm.
And that if this situation doesn't show you right in front of your eyes what systemic racism looks like, I don't know what will. Because the indicator is that every part of law enforcement that showed up to that scene, the EMT, the two chiefs that were at the scene supporting police officers, no one responded to the situation as if something was wrong here. That's the systemic part. Everyone acted normal as this young man died less than 100 yards from his mother's house.
Right. Now,
that's the systemic part, that no one thought that anything was wrong with this in that moment.
Now, people are going to say, well, how is it racist if it was 5 cops that beat him? Let's talk about that.
Because racism is internalized. That's why every community pits its light skins against its dark skins, because everyone is trying to align with that. And when you go into law enforcement, you have to align with the culture of the police department. Nobody goes in Gandhi and turns everybody in there into Gandhis. You have to become a part of that culture. The culture is bigger than you. No one person's going to change it. And then 5 black guys ain't going to be the first.
Right.
Also, it's to note the culture is the supremacy.
Right. The police culture.
It's embedded in it.
They believe every black person is a criminal, especially if you're a black man. They believe
is guilty first.
Exactly. They believe you're a criminal. They believe because of that, they can do whatever, or they believe because of that, anything they do to you is justified. And they believe everyone else feels the same way. And because no one is willing to cross the thin blue line, and when we do see cops, regardless of color, actually say, hey, that's enough, or call someone out for aggressive policing or police brutality, it's those officers who get reprimanded. It's those officers who get fired. It's those officers who get ostracized and eventually forced out of policing, not the ones that are the bad apples, not the ones that are getting complaints all the time. Okay, there's stories that we can cover another time of officers that have come forward now that they are no longer police officers. We're talking former police officers that were reprimanded, ostracized, and essentially forced out of policing because they came forward. You can Google it yourself. Okay, so we're not race baiting here. The pattern of behavior, regardless of what American police department you're looking at, shows a clear bias, and the data supports that. There was a Harvard study done, and the headline of that Harvard study said, hey, black people, unarmed black people and unarmed white people are shot at the same rate by police in America. That was the headline. And that was surprising. People think they shoot black people more. But what that study also found is that they beat black people more. And this is a Harvard study. Mm-hmm. So they controlled for the race of the officers. They controlled for what type of crime was committed, what type of call the officers were responding to. They still saw a very high degree of bias when it came to use of force. Mm-hmm. They beat black people more.
Yes, they do. We're physically manhandled more. People are quicker to put their hands on your person more. They're not gonna grab some white woman or some white guy out of his car and just throw him down on the ground to beat him like that. There's absolutely no way they're going to do that, because they're assuming that this guy's either got a network or he's got resources. They don't think that about black communities.
Yes. Have you ever heard of a white person being beaten to death by cops of any color?
3 doors from their house? No. 3 doors from their house?
Yeah.
They could have actually let him go home. Yeah. They could have just let him go home.
And then for everyone to just act like this is completely normal and nothing's wrong here, for the EMTs to show up and say, oh, well, we were responding to someone being pepper sprayed, and they didn't even bother to check on this person who's clearly bleeding profusely. If they had bothered to check on him at all, it would have been clear immediately this person needs emergency care, not just, they don't just need to be treated for being pepper sprayed. Okay, to your point. Nobody saw anything wrong with this, and they immediately began covering up, and nobody thought anything
was wrong with this
either. That shows a systemic problem. That shows that they did not believe that this black guy,
who looked like he'd been thrown off a building at this point. He was so beaten up.
They did not think of him as a real person. They assumed he was a criminal. They assumed anything they did to him is justified, and they assumed nobody would give a fly fuck about what. That is a cultural, systemic problem. They don't see other black people as human.
Yep.
We need other police reforms that can affect everyone, because we don't want to ignore the Daniel Shavers and Timothy Tompas and Lyndon Camerons that are out there as well. There's an overall abuse of power in policing, but part of the policing culture is these assumptions that they have about black people. And there's nothing black people can do about it either. If we all sing Kumbaya and all, go get a college degree and everybody pulls up their pants and wears business suits all the time, they'll
hate us. They'll still hate us.
Tim Scott, senator from South Carolina, still gets pulled over every time he goes back to South Carolina because he's a black guy driving a nice car in a gated neighborhood.
Tell him.
Other context to add here. New York Times did a study over the course of the 13-minute period. He received 71 commands. Oftentimes, they were either impossible for him to execute or they were contradictory.
Well, partly because he couldn't execute them because they had beaten his head in, and everybody knows once you've had your face punched in a dozen times, it's going to be very hard to hear and follow instructions. All of your senses have been altered, to say the least. So there was no true instruction given. This was just a brutal, what looked like a gang beating. And I hope these guys burn in hell and that they don't have a friend in the world and they feel alone and cold and the sun never shines on them again.
Right.
They've humiliated their families. I hope it destroys their legacies. I don't want to hear anything about where they go to church and how they play the banjo and that they roller skate on Saturdays and give ice cream to the poor. I don't want to hear shit. They've betrayed their race. They've betrayed law enforcement. And I'll tell you what else I find bizarre. I find it very bizarre how quick law enforcement was quick to wheel out that tape. Number one, usually we're fighting for weeks and months on end to get that tape released. They tossed that tape out like steak to a pit bull. Quick were they to fire these black police officers, by the way. How come they didn't fire the white ones that were on the scene right away? That's a problem.
Yes.
That's a problem.
There's a sixth officer.
There's other people there
who tased him. So maybe he's not going to jail for murder.
Preston Hemphill.
Thank you. One more time, because I was talking over you. Sorry.
Preston Hemphill. Say his name too. He's just as guilty as the other five. And so are the other people on the team and the previous EMTs that we mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
And he also said, I hope they stomp his ass. So he didn't chase along with them, but he's sitting there saying, I hope they stomp his ass. Again, he doesn't see this black person as a fellow citizen, fellow American citizen, someone who needs to be served and protected like the people of Memphis deserve. He sees him as a criminal, and he says, I hope they stomp his ass. Anything they do to this person, because we all police officers think this person's a criminal, anything they do to him is justified. I hope they stomp his ass. Systemic problem.
It's disgusting.
Now,
I have a problem with that.
Scorpion unit, the black woman that they've rolled out to try to impress everybody, to try to signal and to try to make sure that folks don't riot and loot and whatnot as a response to this. They
haven't fired her.
Hey, everybody behave. She's the one who started the fucking Scorpion unit.
She did start.
She was actually fired from Atlanta PD.
She was.
Yes, she had to sue and she got reinstated, but she is not this angel who's here to call out the bad actors of policing on her police force. Because if she was here to do that, she would have done it beforehand. She knew the Scorpion unit was a bunch of thugs. She knew the Scorpion unit operated like a gang. She knew the Scorpion unit was aggressive. She trained them to be that way. She started the fucking thing. She's been fired before, and they rolled her out here to say, hey, yeah, this is horrible. We're going to throw all these guys under the bus, and we're with you. This is unconscionable. But hey, all you better behave and don't do anything unreasonable or violent in response to this. Don't act like our officers, the ones that I'm in charge of. Let me see if I can find what she was fired for.
Wow. So based on an article, CBS News.
Carolyn Davis.
Listen to the training for this. According to a former Memphis officer who spoke with CBS News, They said a large number of officers were retiring from the department, so younger, less experienced members of the department were being tapped for the specialized Scorpion teams. They were not well trained, not properly managed. He said he described the training as consisting of 3 days of PowerPoint presentations, 1 day of criminal apprehension instruction, and 1 day at the firing range. Memphis Police Department did not immediately respond to a request for comment on that.
Mm-hmm.
The officers charged in the death were hired from 2017 to 2020. They were 24 to 32 years old. Speak to the chief who put it together.
Yeah. Police Chief Carolyn C.J. Davis. She was fired in 2008 from the Atlanta Police Department for her alleged involvement in a sex crimes investigation into the husband of an Atlanta police sergeant.
Mm-hmm.
The Atlanta Journal-Constitution. 2 detectives accused Davis of telling them not to investigate Terrell Marion Crane, who was married to Sergeant Tanya Crane, after the police department obtained photos of him with underage girls. So she was covering up for other people.
Mm-hmm.
Holding the line, holding the thin blue line. So of course she found herself promoted. Of course she found herself reinstated after she was fired. She was justifiably fired, but the police officers union is going to make sure they get your job back for something like that. You gotta go murder somebody to actually be fired and for the firing to stick if you're a police officer.
The Scorpion unit was launched in November 2021 with the goal of violent crime reduction, according to insider.com. Instead, just over a year later, the name invokes the violent beating death of Nichols. Experts told Insider that specialized police units like SWAT teams or K-9 teams were often necessary and served a unique purpose within police departments, but they have been increasingly getting complaints from the communities about the havoc that they have been wreaking due to officers being inadequately trained or the unit being insufficiently supervised. The intent was good. The end result was a failure, a family attorney said.
Exactly. And there's already think pieces saying, oh, racism didn't kill Tyre Nichols. Moronic, poorly trained cops did. That's a headline.
I don't want to hear any more about the training. What type of training do you need to be told you can't beat somebody to death on the fucking sidewalk?
Right.
There's no training for that. You either have a conscience that's defective or you have a conscience that is effective. It's only one or the other. So apparently going to church didn't train you. Going to the police academy didn't train you. So what other training do you need? I guess your upbringing from your parents never trained you. What further training other than the 3 trainings all human beings go through the course of their life would have altered their attitudes and their choices that night that they haven't been told already? What, their parents never told them not to beat somebody to death? The church they go to never told them to beat somebody to death? The 5 years they've been on the police force, no one ever mentioned, hey, by the way, you can't beat anybody to death. It's not about training. It's about human decency. It's about having a fucking conscience. It's about us as a society not accepting this. Why did these guys act so emboldened? Because they could. That's not entirely their fault. That's our fault. They're not doing that to Irish boys.
Not here, not in the States, not now. Nope. Yeah, that headline is an op-ed from Pierce Morgan.
Right? They're not doing that to Korean boys on the side of the road.
Yeah.
They're getting away with it with our communities because they think we don't have the resources and the network that's needed to protect ourselves. And hopefully this case will have to do something because this case, as far as I'm concerned, this entire police force should be shut down.
Yeah, they believe that there wouldn't be any consequences for what they were doing.
They genuinely didn't think there was going to be any consequences.
Do you really think this is the first time they jumped on somebody like that? This is probably regular practice for them. And they probably have never faced consequences before. I've also seen headlines that said, several of these officers have had complaints about them. One of them used to be a jailer and had complaints about him
beating prisoners, aggressive treatment of the prisoners. Yes.
So how does he even end up on your police force?
Maybe that's why they chose him.
Exactly.
I mean, what is happening here? What do we expect?
Yeah. Are these cops moronic? Yes. Are they poorly trained? Yes. Did that play into this at all? To your point, how much training do you need to know not to
be a scumbag?
How many more tests do they need to take? How much field training do they need? What kind of? There's no amount of sensitivity. You can't sensitivity train yourself out of this. This is just you're a scumbag person, like you said. It's just human decency. That's why I don't believe in more training as a means of police reform. I believe in accountability as a means of police reform. I think if you just make it clear, there will be consequences if you walk around acting like you can do whatever you want to someone and whatever you do to that person is justified. There will be consequences for that. You got to pay civil judgments and civil settlements out of your pension, or else you got to carry some insurance. And if you don't want to do that, you can do death duty, but you got to have insurance, or you have to attest to your ability to pay out of your pension, and you will be held accountable for that.
I think it should come out of pensions. It should not be coming out of taxpayer dollars when these lawsuits come through. You start taking this money out of pensions, best believe these types of crimes are going to stop.
All of a sudden, they will find a way.
All of a sudden, they're going to drop.
All that de-escalation training, all that sensitivity training, all of a sudden it's gonna show up in actual practice, just like they do in the suburbs. They know how to de-escalate in the suburbs. They know how to not beat somebody to death in the suburbs.
Yes, they do.
They know how to deal with
the same crimes.
For the same
fucking crimes. The same.
I was just talking to my friend who grew up in the Berkeley Hills. His parents are professors and shit, and they go drinking, at high school and college, they go drinking at the golf courses and shit, and they run away from the cops all the fucking time. And guess what? The cops find a way magically of not
kill them,
those white teenagers and college age students to death when they catch them for reckless driving, drunk driving, MIP, minor in possession of alcohol, minor in possession of weed or whatever, or drunk public intoxication. They find a way to not handle white kids, white people in general like that in Marin, in Piedmont, and in these areas. Why?
In Berkeley.
Because they know there's
because they give them the benefit of the doubt. That's that white advantage.
Consequences.
Right. It's the advantage. It's not a privilege. It's a white advantage. They get the benefit of the doubt. Listen to this note about the Scorpion Unit. Within weeks of launching the Scorpion Unit, like as we said earlier, it was launched in November 2021. Within 3 weeks, they made 338 arrests. 125 felony arrests were included in that, and recovered over almost 100 weapons. How is that even possible in 3 weeks? It's a 50-person unit that operates 7 days a week, by the way. I wonder where the budget for that came from.
Mm-hmm. They're probably kicking at everybody's door.
That's exactly what they're doing. The jump out boys. They hunt. They're predators.
Yeah. And I would love to know how many of those arrests actually led to convictions. Because just because you arrested 300 people, Tyre Nichols was about to be arrested for reckless driving, and they would have said, hey, look, Scorpion Unit made another arrest. No, go Scorpion Unit. Was he actually convicted? Would he have actually been convicted? Was there anything there?
Right.
Are we safer at all? Let's say Tyre Nichols didn't get beat to death and he was actually arrested and taken to jail. Would Memphis be a safer place with him in jail? No. You're supposed to be restoring peace in our neighborhood. He wasn't a gang member. He didn't have weapons. He wasn't a drug dealer. He wasn't a violent person. He had no history of violence at all.
Nope.
In what way was
Jay, if there was anything in Tyre Nichols' background, they would have been thrown that bullshit up on TV by now. They would have blasted out his mama was a hoe, his dad was a crackhead, his little sister Pookie. They would have found he beat up an old lady in 3rd grade. They would have been found some shit on him if there was any. And that's how you know that there's not, because you haven't heard a peep about Tyre Nichols' background. Heard a damn thing. Not that should matter in any incident anyway. When you are whatever is happening in that incident is what is applicable to the situation. But nonetheless, I appreciate the fact that there was nothing to pull out on him.
Right. Because they did do that with Keenan Anderson.
They tried to do that with everybody.
They found weed and they found cocaine in his system. And so they tried to make it sound like that's why he died and that's why he freaked out. You have no idea how much was in his system. He might not have been high on either of those substances during the car accident. You have no idea whether or not that played into him dying from being tased like 10 times or more than 10 times. Okay. If you get tased that many times, you can die. It doesn't matter if there's anything in your system, but they immediately tried to spin him as this druggie who was just wilding out and completely uncontrollable and everything. You have no idea how much was in his system. He could have, that shit could have shown up from a party he went to the weekend before. And I'm really sick and tired of them doing that with every person who gets killed.
It is the most disgusting thing I've ever seen. These guys have nowhere to go. But I have to tell you, I think it's very bizarre. And I think it's actually disappointing that the police department did not support their boys in blue. I mean, what made them fire them before their case even got to court? What happened? That means the police union didn't even back them up. If they're fired already, my understanding is that means they don't get union lawyers. They don't get backup from their unit. Why do you think that they were so quick to drop them like that? I think that's fucked up. Like, if I was a cop, I'd be like, damn,
because
that's
the
how you
video
do
is
it?
that bad. Because it's that bad. And I think also they're trying to
They
close
didn't know it was that bad, huh?
They saw the video before anyone else did.
They
know
sure
the video
did.
is that bad, and they know we had better close. Like, we have to cut them off to save the rest of the department, because if we try to defend this, folks are going to be trying to cut our budget, and there's going to be full on riots. So I think they're trying to. I think it honestly probably came down from the mayor. Literally, no, we can't try to sit here and fucking defend this, and we're not even gonna consider it, because if we do, they're gonna burn this bitch down. I think literally it was just a cost benefit analysis. Yeah, Blue Lives Matter is not coming to save you.
Clearly not, my brother. On this episode of Raw Food.